Today we will talk about why immigrants came to America, how they came to America, and what some of their experiences were like once they got here. Between 1865 and 1920, close to 30 million people immigrated or moved from their homeland to the United States. Here are some of the reasons why so many came to America. In the late 1800s, people in many parts of the world were on the move, from farms to cities and from one country to another. These people were experiencing push factors that led them to want to leave their homelands. Some of these push factors were crop failures and famine in different areas of the world. Others faced shortages of land and jobs and rising taxes. Some were also escaping religious or political persecution. For example, Jews in Russia faced hostility from Christian neighbors and the government. But there were also pull factors which caused immigrants to be drawn to America. Some of these pull factors were economic opportunities through the promise of new jobs, and many had hopes of securing free government land through the Homestead Act. Many people also wanted the pursuit of personal, religious, and political freedom. In America, everyone could go to school. Young men were not forced to serve long years in the army, and citizens could freely take part in a democratic government. Some immigrants decided to leave behind the persecution they had faced in their homelands and start a new life in the land of the free. So how did the immigrants come to the United States? Immigrants from Europe crossed the Atlantic Ocean on powerful steamships. They arrived in ports like New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Most immigrants traveled in steerage, which was the large open area beneath the ship's deck. Passengers faced limited toilet facilities, no privacy, and poor food. Asian immigrants crossed the Pacific Ocean to Western ports and often faced the same grim traveling conditions aboard ships. Here is an example of a child's experience crossing the ocean in one of these large steamships. In his own words, Morris Schinder said, "When we got on the Rotterdam, we had a field day. One, I was never on a ship before, and I was awed by it. It was overwhelming. All the people and boarding the ship, it was all a brand new experience. We left Rotterdam, and we set sail, and about half an hour after the ship started, my sister got very seasick. It took us 14 days to cross the Atlantic, and in the entire crossing she was in steerage, and the only time she came up for a breath of fresh air was just about a half an hour before we saw the Statue of Liberty. Now the experience of the ship, being young, was an adventure in that particular situation because we were on the lowest level of the ship. We couldn't go aboard. Some kids were more adventurous. My brother and I, we would sneak aboard. We were always chased. And when we saw some people who traveled maybe in first or second class, and we looked upon them as royalty, but we were confined primarily to steerage. Steerage was one huge place. It was the lowest deck. The stench. It was the summer, in August. The humidity, the heat. Having no air conditioning, having cooling facilities. It was very hot, compounded by the fact that there must have been anywhere from 200 to 300 people in that huge cavernous area. The body smells, the body odors, the lack of sanitation, the lack of any kind of facilities. Washing. There was no such thing as washing or bathing. The stench, the vermin, it was rat infested. But being children, I guess, it had its advantages. In this case, because we always tried to get out of there. We tried to get out of the steerage, to get out of the babble of voices, get out of the heat and the stench, and get on the main deck. We were all permitted to stay there for a little while, but we were constantly chased. But the crossing went for me in particular, it went very quickly. This young man came from Poland to the United States into New York Harbor. So the ports of entry to the U.S. Though there were many ports of entry for immigrants, such as New York, Boston, and Philadelphia in the east, San Francisco and Seattle in the west, 70% of immigrants came through New York, or what they called the Golden Door. So the federal government set up Ellis Island in New York Harbor as the reception center for steerage passengers. Immigrants were required to pass a physical exam to prevent disease from spreading into the city. If a passenger was found to have a contagious illness, such as tuberculosis, they were quarantined or isolated for a period of time before they could enter the city. Sometimes immigrants were sent back to their home country if they had serious diseases such as trachoma, an eye disease common among immigrants.